You see, the mind is a curious thing. It moves, constantly seeking something, answers, security, meaning. It's as though we believe that if we just think enough, we will find some way to control life, bend it to our will. But the more we try to control, the more we become imprisoned in our own thoughts. The mind is an intricate and complex system, constantly in motion, with thoughts flowing through it like a river, ever changing, ever shifting. It is both an extraordinary gift and, at times, a source of great frustration. The nature of the mind is to continually seek patterns, explanations, and meaning in the world around us. It is relentless in its quest for answers, often overcomplicating simple truths and finding connections where none may exist. At its core, the mind is an organ of survival designed to keep us safe by predicting outcomes, analyzing patterns, and making decisions based on past experiences. This is a vital function that has allowed humanity to thrive and adapt to an ever-changing environment. However, when taken to excess, when the mind becomes consumed by its own processes, it can create more problems than it solves. The mind's relentless pursuit of control often leads it down a path of overthinking. It believes that through careful analysis and planning, it can shape the future and avoid unwanted outcomes. However, this sense of control is illusory. No matter how much the mind speculates, no matter how many scenarios it runs through, it cannot predict the unpredictable. Life has a way of unfolding in ways that defy logic and reason, often leaving us feeling unprepared and out of control. Despite this, the mind doesn't stop. It keeps thinking, keeps trying to make sense of things, even when there is no sense to be made. This is where the frustration begins. The mind, in its constant search for answers, becomes trapped in loops of thought, overanalyzing, overthinking, and yet never truly finding resolution. In this state, the mind starts to work against itself. It creates stories, spins narratives that don't reflect the reality of the situation. The mind fabricates fears and doubts, often imagining the worst-case scenario and dwelling on it endlessly. It projects itself into the future, worrying about things that have not yet come to pass and may never come to pass at all. These imagined fears feed into one another, and the mind grows louder, more chaotic, more insistent. It becomes consumed by these thoughts, and in doing so it distances itself from the present moment. The mind is no longer fully engaged with what is happening right now. Instead, it is caught up in a future that may never arrive, or a past that no longer exists. This constant mental chatter pulls us away from the present, and in doing so, it robs us of the peace that can be found in simply being. The mind is a tool that can either serve us or imprison us. When we allow it to run unchecked, it takes on a life of its own, perpetuating a cycle of unnecessary stress and anxiety. The problem is not the thinking itself, but the attachment to it. The more we believe that our thoughts are a reflection of reality, the more we suffer. The mind tells us stories, but those stories are not always true. They are constructs, products of our past experiences, our fears, our conditioning. Yet we often treat them as fact, and in doing so, we allow them to shape our reality. The nature of the mind is not inherently bad. It is a tool that helps us navigate the world. But when we become trapped in its labyrinth of thought, we lose sight of its true purpose. It is not meant to be the source of our identity, nor is it meant to be the master of our lives. The mind's true role is to help us engage with the world around us, not to create false narratives or fabricate problems that do not exist. Yet, so often we allow it to take over, believing that if we think enough, we will find the answers we seek. But the truth is, overthinking is not the answer, it is the problem. The more the mind tries to control, the more it distorts the very reality it seeks to understand. The mind's constant striving can be exhausting. It wears us down, wears our relationships down, and even damages our connection with ourselves. In the quest for certainty, we lose the ability to simply be. The mind, in its endless search for control, forgets the simple truth that life is unpredictable and ever-changing, and that is precisely what makes it beautiful. The illusion of control is one of the most powerful tricks the mind plays on us. We convince ourselves that by thinking enough, planning enough, or worrying enough, we can influence the course of events in our lives. It is as if we believe that control is within our grasp, a tangible thing we can manipulate to our will. In reality, however, control is often an illusion, an idea created by the mind to ease its anxiety and fear of the unknown. The mind, ever restless, seeks to impose order on a world that is inherently unpredictable and chaotic. This desire for control is rooted in the need for security. When things are uncertain, we feel vulnerable. We fear the unpredictability of life, the possibility of loss, failure, or harm. So we grasp at the idea that if we control every detail, if we anticipate every outcome, we can shield ourselves from the pain that uncertainty brings. But the more we chase this illusion of control, the more we become enslaved to it. We begin to believe that we must anticipate every possibility, manage every situation, and exert influence over every aspect of our lives. We feel that we must have a plan for everything, that we must control every variable to ensure the desired outcome. This relentless pursuit of control creates a sense of constant tension as we become hyper-aware of every potential threat, every potential mistake. The mind constantly worries, overanalyzes, and tries to predict the future, creating a mental maze that leaves little room for peace or ease. We live in a state of perpetual planning and preparedness, always bracing for the worst. And yet, no matter how much we prepare, life continues to surprise us in ways we cannot predict. In the face of uncertainty, the mind clings to its need for control because it perceives it as a safeguard. But the truth is, the more we try to control, the more we are actually resisting the natural flow of life. The universe does not operate according to our limited understanding of it. The events of life unfold in ways that often defy logic or reason. No matter how much we try to control things, we cannot stop a storm from coming or prevent an accident from happening. We cannot dictate when opportunities will arise or when challenges will appear. And yet, in our attempt to control, we create a false sense of security that only leaves us feeling more isolated and disconnected from the world around us. We become convinced that the answer to our discomfort lies in having everything under control, but this belief keeps us trapped in a cycle of stress and frustration. This illusion of control extends to our relationships, our careers, and even our own emotions. We believe that by controlling how others see us or how they behave toward us, we can shape our reality. We try to manipulate outcomes, using our actions to dictate how things unfold, but in doing so, we forget that other people have their own will and agency. In our careers, we often become obsessed with climbing the ladder, achieving success, and securing a stable future. But despite our best efforts, life can still throw us curveballs, whether it's a job loss, an unexpected illness, or a shift in the market. We cannot control the forces at play outside of our own actions. Even our emotions, which we often attempt to manage and suppress, are beyond our control. We cannot simply will ourselves not to feel anger, sadness, or fear. These emotions arise as part of the human experience, and by trying to control them, we often end up suppressing them, only to have them resurface in ways that are even more difficult to manage. The paradox of the illusion of control is that in our attempt to hold on to it, we end up losing touch with the very thing we seek, peace and freedom. The more we try to control, the more we distance ourselves from the natural rhythms of life. We forget that life is not a linear process that can be meticulously planned or anticipated. It is an unfolding journey full of surprises, twists, and turns. When we allow life to unfold without the constant need for control, we begin to experience a deeper sense of freedom and connection. We start to see that we are not isolated beings trying to force our will on the world, but participants in an ever-changing dance with the universe. In letting go of the illusion of control, we find that life is far more enjoyable, far more meaningful, and far more enriching than we ever imagined. Living in the future is a mental habit that many of us fall into without realizing it. It's an escape from the present moment, a longing to be somewhere other than where we are right now. The mind, in its natural tendency to predict and plan, often drifts into the future, imagining what could happen next, what might go wrong, or what we hope to achieve. We find ourselves trapped in an endless cycle of what-ifs, and constructing elaborate scenarios that, while not yet real, seem so vivid and overwhelming that they affect the way we feel and act in the present. In doing this, we lose touch with the here and now. We forget that the present moment is the only one we can truly live in, and instead we allow our minds to carry us away to a time that is not yet here. When we live in the future, we are constantly projecting our hopes, fears, and uncertainties onto a time that is inherently uncertain. We worry about what might go wrong, what might happen to our careers, our relationships, our health. We imagine the worst-case scenarios, creating unnecessary anxiety over things that have not yet come to pass, and in many cases never will. We become so consumed by the idea of what might happen that we miss the richness of what is happening right now. The mind, in its endless striving for control, believes that if we plan for every possible outcome, we can somehow avoid the discomfort of the unknown. But in doing so, we deny ourselves the peace that comes with simply being present. At the same time, living in the future is not only about worrying about negative outcomes, it's also about longing for something better, imagining that happiness, success, or fulfillment lies ahead of us. We think, when I get that promotion, I'll be happy, or once I'm in a relationship, everything will be perfect. We push our joy, our peace, and our sense of well-being into a future moment, believing that only then will we be content. But in doing this, we are postponing our happiness, placing it in a future that may or may not ever arrive. The future is always shifting and changing, and by living for it, we miss the opportunity to experience the very thing we seek in the present. When we are constantly focused on the future, we also lose sight of the richness of the present moment. The world around us continues to unfold, but we are not fully aware of it. We miss the simple pleasures, the warmth of the sun on our skin, the taste of our food, the sound of a loved one's voice, because we are too busy thinking about what might come next. Our minds are so preoccupied with what is not yet here that we forget to engage with the beauty of what already is. We become disconnected from the present, disconnected from life itself. This tendency to live in the future can also create a sense of dissatisfaction, as we always feel that there is something missing. We are constantly chasing after something that we believe will complete us, whether it's an achievement, a possession, or a relationship. But the future is a moving target. It always seems just out of reach. No matter how much we strive, no matter how much we plan, we are left with the feeling that something is always just beyond our grasp. We end up living for a future that may never meet our expectations, constantly seeking something that feels elusive. Living in the future can cause us to miss opportunities that are right in front of us. We become so fixated on what's next that we fail to see what's now. Opportunities for growth, connection, and joy are always present, but they can be easily overlooked if we are too focused on what's ahead. Life is not a race to some distant destination. It is a journey that unfolds in the present moment, with each step offering new possibilities. When we live in the future, we forget that the path we are walking on is just as important as the place we are trying to reach. We forget that the experience of living is in the moment, in the choices we make today, in how we respond to life right now. Living in the future is, in many ways, a form of distraction, a way to avoid facing the present and all that it entails. The present moment can feel uncomfortable or uncertain, and so we escape into the future, where we believe we have more control, more certainty. But in doing so, we rob ourselves of the peace and joy that can only come from being fully present. The future is always uncertain, always shifting, always just beyond our grasp. The only real moment we have is the one we are living right now. By letting go of our obsession with what is to come, we allow ourselves to fully experience the beauty of the present, with all its messiness, imperfection, and richness. The paradox of choice is a concept that reveals a deeper truth about the way we navigate our decisions, and how the abundance of options available to us often leads to confusion, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. In a world filled with limitless choices, we might expect that more options would lead to greater freedom, happiness, and satisfaction. However, the opposite often happens. The more choices we have, the harder it becomes to make a decision, and the less content we feel with the outcome once we do. In this sense, choice, which is supposed to be liberating, can become a burden. We find ourselves trapped in a sea of options, each one carrying its own set of potential benefits and drawbacks. The sheer number of alternatives can leave us paralyzed, unable to move forward because we fear making the wrong decision. Each option seems like a doorway to a different version of our life, and the uncertainty of not knowing which one will lead to the best outcome becomes overwhelming. This is where the paradox sets in. The more we are faced with choices, the more likely we are to experience a sense of regret, self-doubt, and second-guessing. Instead of feeling empowered by the options before us, we begin to wonder if the decision we make is truly the best one. We imagine all the other possibilities that we might have chosen, wondering if we are missing out on something better. What could have been if we had taken that different path? This constant comparison between choices creates a mental fog, leaving us feeling uncertain and unfulfilled, even after we've made our decision. This paradox manifests in many areas of our lives. Take something as simple as shopping, for instance. We go into a store confronted with hundreds of different products, all promising to meet our needs in some way. But instead of feeling confident in our choice, we begin to question whether we made the right selection. Perhaps that brand was better, or maybe there's a new version of the product we didn't see. We start to wonder if there is something out there that would have been a better fit for us. In the end, what was meant to be a simple purchase turns into an exhausting process of endless deliberation, leaving us unsatisfied no matter what we choose. This is not just confined to material decisions. The paradox of choice also extends to more significant life choices such as career paths, relationships, and even personal values. With so many directions to go, it becomes harder to commit to any one path. The mind becomes obsessed with all the what-ifs and might-have-beens, creating a sense of dissatisfaction, even with the most carefully made decisions. The abundance of possibilities makes us aware of just how many opportunities we might miss, and this knowledge can leave us feeling stuck, unable to fully embrace the choice we've made. Instead of accepting that every choice is simply part of a larger journey, we keep returning to the question of whether we've made the right one, as though our happiness and fulfillment depend on finding the one perfect answer. The fear of making the wrong decision leads to decision paralysis. Faced with so many options, the brain becomes overwhelmed, unsure of where to start, and unable to confidently pick one path. We worry about making mistakes, about the consequences of choosing the wrong option. We fear that our choice will lead to disappointment or regret. And so instead of making a choice, we delay, put it off, or avoid it altogether, hoping that somehow the decision will become easier, or that the perfect answer will reveal itself. The more choices we are given, the more we are reminded of the possibility of failure, which can make us hesitant and indecisive. In addition to the paralysis of choice, there's also the burden of responsibility that comes with having too many options. When we make a choice, we are often burdened with the belief that we must make the best one possible. The desire to make a perfect choice increases the weight of decision-making, creating pressure to find the absolute best solution and to anticipate every potential outcome. In reality, though, no choice can ever be perfect. Every decision comes with trade-offs, and the best we can do is make the choice that aligns with our current values, needs, and desires. However, the paradox of choice makes us think that perfection is possible. And when we fall short of that, we experience dissatisfaction or frustration. The paradox of choice points to a deeper truth: more options do not necessarily make us happier, and in fact they can often make us more anxious and dissatisfied. The mind, when confronted with too many alternatives, struggles to make sense of them all. It becomes fixated on the fear of missing out, on the possibility that another choice might have been the right one, and in doing so, it prevents us from fully enjoying the choice that we've made. By constantly comparing our choices with other potential ones, we end up diminishing the value of what we have in front of us. The more choices we have, the harder it becomes to feel at peace with our decision, and the less joy we feel in our ability to make choices at all. The paradox of choice, in its essence, reveals that sometimes less is more. When we are not overwhelmed by endless possibilities, we can embrace the present moment with more clarity, confidence, and ease. The freedom in letting go is a concept that, at first glance, might seem counterintuitive. We live in a world where holding on is often seen as a virtue, holding on to relationships, possessions, goals, or ideals. We are taught that success comes from perseverance, from the refusal to let go when things get tough. And yet there is an undeniable power in releasing our grip on certain things, whether they are past hurts, unattainable desires, or rigid expectations, and allowing ourselves the space to breathe and grow. Letting go does not mean giving up or resigning ourselves to defeat. It means recognizing that some things are beyond our control, and that clinging to them only adds to our suffering. In this sense, letting go becomes a path to inner freedom, allowing us to shed the weight of unnecessary burdens and move forward unencumbered. When we hold on too tightly, we restrict our own growth. Our attachment to things, whether they are material possessions, relationships, or even past experiences, becomes a form of imprisonment. We become so attached to how we think things should be that we close ourselves off from the possibilities of how things could be. The mind becomes fixated on an outcome, on a particular vision of how life is supposed to unfold, and in doing so, we limit ourselves. The tighter we hold on, the more we bind ourselves to a specific result, and the more we lose the freedom to explore alternative paths, new opportunities, or different ways of thinking. By letting go, we give ourselves permission to live without the constant weight of expectations or the fear of failure. We allow ourselves to flow with life, to adapt, and to respond to situations with greater ease and grace. Letting go also means releasing our attachment to the past. Often we hold on to old memories, regrets, or unresolved emotions, thinking that by holding them close, we can somehow keep them from slipping away. But in reality, this only keeps us anchored to what has already happened, preventing us from fully engaging with the present. The past is gone, and no amount of regret or attachment can change it. When we let go of the need to control or relive past events, we free ourselves from the emotional weight they carry. This doesn't mean forgetting or disregarding our past. It means accepting it, learning from it, and choosing to move forward. Only then can we truly embrace the present moment and the opportunities it offers. Another aspect of letting go is the release of control. So often we cling to the belief that we must control every aspect of our lives in order to ensure success, security, or happiness. We plan every detail, manage every variable, and worry about every potential outcome. But no matter how much we try to control things, life is ultimately unpredictable. Trying to maintain control over everything creates a constant state of tension, anxiety, and frustration. When we let go of this need for control, we stop forcing things to fit into a particular mold. Instead, we begin to trust the natural flow of life, understanding that sometimes the most beautiful things come when we allow them to unfold in their own time without interference. By letting go of control, we open ourselves up to spontaneity, creativity, and the joy of simply being. Letting go also creates space for self-compassion. Often we hold on to unrealistic expectations of ourselves, believing that we must always be productive, successful, or perfect. We criticize ourselves for every perceived failure or mistake, and this inner pressure builds up over time, leading to stress and self-doubt. When we let go of these harsh expectations and give ourselves permission to be imperfect, we free ourselves from the tyranny of self-judgment. We begin to understand that our worth is not defined by our achievements or how well we meet others' standards, but by our intrinsic value as human beings. In letting go of these unrealistic ideals, we cultivate a sense of self-love and acceptance that allows us to show up for ourselves with kindness and patience. Letting go also involves freeing ourselves from the burden of external approval. We often find ourselves holding on to the desire for validation from others, seeking their approval before we can feel good about our choices or ourselves. This external dependence can be stifling as it prevents us from living authentically. When we let go of the need for others' validation, we reclaim our own power. We trust in our own judgment, our own intuition, and our own sense of worth. This shift allows us to live with greater authenticity, making decisions based on what feels true for us rather than what others expect or approve of. The freedom in letting go is not a passive act of surrender, but an active choice to release what no longer serves us. It is a courageous step toward living more fully, more authentically, and more peacefully. When we let go, we make room for new experiences, new relationships, and new opportunities. We stop living in the past, we stop trying to control the future, and we stop measuring our worth by the standards of others. Instead, we embrace the present moment, trusting that by releasing what we no longer need, we create the space for our true potential to unfold. Letting go, in this sense, is not a loss but a gain, one that brings with it the freedom to live more fully and in greater alignment with who we truly are.